Hello and welcome to Journalist Hangout UK, the show where we discuss issues both African and worldwide, which are affecting the continent. And we look at how these issues are seen at home and in the African diaspora. I'm Priscilla Nwikpo, and I'm pleased to welcome our panel. Ayo Johnson, journalist and specialist in African affairs. Juliana Olayinka, journalist and broadcaster. And Lanre Akinola, editor of African Business. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a look at this.
Raila Amolo Odinga, in full realization of the high calling, assumed the office of the People's President of the Republic of Kenya. Do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance.
Juliana, welcome back. Congratulations.
Nice to see you, Mom. I'm back.
And how is the little one?
She's very well. Thank you for asking.
Good, good, good. We were just seeing there, the news story of the week, Raila Odinga, the opposition leader in Kenya, quite literally inaugurating himself, announcing himself as the people's president. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, if it looks like a coup, smells like a coup, acts like a coup, then really it's a coup. I definitely think it's an act of high treason. Of course, Raila Odinga, I don't know why, but he seemed to be, to me, somebody that people admired. You always like, I wouldn't call him an underdog, but, you know, an opposition leader who's willing to stand up for the people, grassroots politics. You know, he says he will actually die for the cause as well. So I've kind of admired him from afar. But I think what he's done and the acts that he caused, we all saw earlier this week, I think it's really, really dangerous, especially in a country like Kenya, which we know can be politically fragile.
Lanre, I mean, when you saw that, what did you think?
I think it's easy to dismiss it. It's easy to treat it as a joke, but it has to be taken seriously. The good thing is that, you know, despite his agitation, what's holding in Kenya is the right political processes, the right judicial processes are being observed. We know that this is a continuation of what we saw last year. I think it's important. I think it has to be treated as important. We can't just sit here and ridicule the man.
Okay. I mean, Ayo, would you say this was democracy's growing pains, or is this democracy's reversal?
This guy is a laughingstock. Honestly, it's embarrassment. I think it sets the wrong tone. I don't think any country in the world would respect him. They would accept him. And what he did there goes against the constitution. It puts his own country at risk. It creates unnecessary divide. And I think we should be hearing from the UN, the African Union, including the EU, and any other civilized institution criticizing him heavily.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, and understandably so, because he turned up for his mock inauguration, minus his wife, minus his would-be deputy, minus, you know, so many key figures. But he didn't turn up for the election in the first instance. I mean, it's a little odd, is it not?
I think it's odd, but then there's a lot going on, and let's not forget, you know, if we're talking about the AU, the UN, and how they're going to respond to this. Unfortunately, we're not really sure what's exactly going on the ground. Of course, a lot of the media are saying, well, they've been shut off, haven't they? You know, Uhuru Kenyatta said anybody that's going to air or broadcast this inauguration will be blocked, and they have been blocked. So we're not sure exactly what's going on the ground. A lot of people are saying beforehand, Odinga's got a lot of support from the military. He did say publicly that he wouldn't be sworn in as presidents have been in other African countries. He'd be sworn in the way we saw a recent swearing in Zimbabwe, and we know that that took place really kind of by a coup. And again, he did say that he's willing to die for the cause. So it's very, very dangerous. A lot of people are saying that, you know, Kenyatta needs to take away his passport, put him on house arrest, because he said that he will form a government in exile. And it seems like he will have a guerrilla faction behind him. So clearly there's a lot of really serious stuff going on.
Ayo, I mean, Juliana just made mention there of, you know, TV stations being shut down. Is Kenyatta overreacting?
It shows that it's not a joke, that this kind of agitation, Lanre, by the way, not Ayo, this kind of
My apology.
It's all right. This kind of agitation is it is risky and it's unnecessary. Now, by all accounts, the correct process was followed for the presidential rerun, which is what this is all about, which
Right.
Odinga boycotted in the end. And there is a bit of sore loser syndrome going on here. But Juliana makes an important point, which is he does have a constituency. He does represent, a sizable chunk of the Kenyan population. So it can't be taken too lightly. The TV shutdowns are a reflection of that. The government understands this isn't just a publicity stunt. I would agree that it's reckless. I would agree that he is, he's agitating on a level he really shouldn't, because, the initial poll was cancelled by the Supreme Court. There was a rerun. It's not as though Kenyatta just arbitrarily won this election. I would say it's time to accept that Kenyatta is the president of Kenya. Try again in a few years,
I mean, Lanre just said there that Kenyatta did not. It's not as though he won the election fully, as it were. Is there a question mark over Kenyatta's position as president? There are reports that the EU election monitoring team are not being permitted to deliver their reports of their findings. So is there a question mark? Is there something that Kenyatta is trying to hide or he's concerned about?
I don't think anyone can prevent the EU from putting up a report. Any institution, they are independent, they're outside of the country. If they don't like it in there, they can walk away and then do the report and people can see it. So I don't agree with that.
That's a point.
But this guy is a very old man. This is his
What has his age got to do with it?
Well, politics is very energetic. It takes a lot out of you. He's tried his best. He can't get there. The finish line is so far away. He's missed it. He feels that he has to grab the attention, and doing it this way, I think what Juliana said was so perfect. If he wishes, he can go into exile. If he's not forced to, he can form his government there. But don't destabilize the country and sit in there and watch it go up in flames. That's silly, very stupid, and ultimately I'm very, very disappointed in it.
I mean, Lanre, Kenya has been one of those African countries that have, they've really upheld democracy and they've led the way, from 2011 up until this point. We've seen a lot of changes. How do you think this is going to impact the Kenyan democratic process?
Hopefully it strengthens it, because this is putting a lot of pressure on it. It's far from perfect. Let's not celebrate it too loudly. There are serious issues politically in Kenya. The bigger picture and the bigger question is around the government delivering on economic terms. Despite plenty of promises from Uhuru Kenyatta and plenty of potential, on the whole, the lot of the average Kenyan has not improved on the level that it really should. And that is where I would say the emphasis needs to be. If I were in a position to advise Raila Odinga, I would say use the next few years to put as much pressure as you can on this government to deliver. And if they do not deliver, go at it again in the next few years. Kenya needs a strong opposition right now. It doesn't need someone out of office agitating, because things are far from perfect under Kenyatta, far from perfect.
Juliana, what should Kenyatta do now?
Well, a lot of people say that Kenyatta, in all his, in pomp and ceremony, Kenyatta he's a pampered individual. He has, even though of course we know Odinga has also come from quite a wealthy background, he doesn't have the grassroots following that Odinga has. And a lot of people are saying he doesn't know how to play politics. He's too trusting. So again, I definitely feel like there needs to be a punishment for Odinga, I feel. And I do believe that, if it's
So should he arrest him?
I definitely feel there should be some sort of house.
Would the arrest not spark some kind of uprising?
It will,
things, right?
exactly. And so a lot of people are saying that, Odinga, because we know NASA, his party is already fractured. You mentioned his deputy wasn't there. His wife didn't attend.
No.
We don't know why she...
No, she had some family emergency.
She had a family emergency. But he doesn't necessarily have the backing from his core team he used to. Some people are saying he's got a lot of young people in his ear who don't have any political experience and are trying to weigh in on his, let's say, popularity to try and take over what happens with the government.
So he's probably actually hoping that there's going to be a crackdown.
Exactly.
Because, he's agitating.
And then an uprising.
Yeah, and the TV station shutdown has already made a lot of headlines. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of hoping to get arrested.
Yes.
Because that's only going to
on that note, Ayo,
which they probably won't do because of that.
But Ayo, do you think that if he were to be arrested, would it spark, as Lanre is suggesting, that it's going to suddenly inflame the whole place?
Where is now he's better placed to be arrested locally, because if he then gets arrested internationally and you get International Criminal Court chasing him, and then what could happen to him? We could see him in prison somewhere like, as we see Charles Taylor in Britain right now.
If you look, sorry, very quickly, Priscilla, if you look at the Constitution, he swore allegiance to the Constitution, which is an act of treason. It was an attempted coup, so he has to be punished. And if not, then it shows that Kenyatta's weak.
Wow. We could go on and on and on about Kenya, but we're going to take a quick break now. We have plenty more to discuss, so please join us in a few moments. Hello and welcome back to Journalist Hangout UK. I'm Priscilla, Nwikpo, and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel. Ayo Johnson, Juliana Olayinka, and Lanre Akinola. So, I mean, the other story that is running this week is that China is not only going around building parliamentary buildings in Africa, but the word is that they built the new African Union building in Ethiopia. They've been spying on African Union for 5 solid years. Juliana, let me come to you first on this. I don't know, are they going around just spying on Africa in total?
In a question, yes, I think a lot of countries are doing it. I think when I heard this story, I kind of felt, I felt sick to my stomach. Not surprised, but sick that, oh wow, so Sino-Africa relations, you know, what they all warned us could happen has been happening. And it's been right under our nose. Obviously, Le Monde, the French newspaper, broke the story. China and all the diplomats of course, denied it, but it seems undeniable. We know that cybersecurity, with what was happening with the hackings of the American election, the French election, many elections across the world, that cybersecurity is at the top of security issues that we have across the globe. So you've got to be very careful. And we know infrastructure in Africa is barely there. So I'm not sure how we have been able to protect ourselves, and allowing the Chinese to come and give us a brand new shiny building and give us all of the servers and not monitor what they were doing is shocking.
I mean, Lanre, from what Juliana is saying there, they brought the bricks for the building. I'm sure they even brought the water from China. They brought the furniture, they brought the pens, surely there would have been layers of cameras or of spy equipment, if you like, of bugs everywhere. Do you think, is it a case of them, were we doing business at a very high cost here, or as Kagame puts it, what is a big deal? Everybody's been spied on.
Yeah, Kagame is right. Countries spy on each other. It's what they do. So there shouldn't be any shock or outrage about this. But it does highlight an important dynamic, which is infrastructure dependency. That's what I would call it. The Chinese paid for the entire building and built the entire building.
Yeah.
Now, you can't dismiss that. You know, that is something that you should value. But what it reinforces is the need for much better vigilance and oversight on the African side. Africa is not going to build the infrastructure it needs by itself. It does not have the money. It does not have the capacity. It does not have the resources. It needs partners like China. It needs partners like Turkey to build these things. But it has to become much more careful about how these projects are managed. This is a great example of that. China is building ports all over the continent, sea and airports. They are financing things like telecommunication satellites in Nigeria. All of these are opportunities for them to build in, back doors to spy on the continent, and they will certainly do it unless on the African side you have much better oversight. I'm not going to suggest for 1 second that Africa should abandon its relationship with China, but it clearly needs to be much more on top of things.
Ayo, let me come to you. As Lanre mentioned there, they are literally building everything. They've built parliamentary buildings in the Seychelles. They've done it in Senegal. They've done it, they're building ports. They're building everywhere. Is it fair for Africa, let me say the leadership in Africa, to just sort of welcome it, take everything, but don't take the time to check on behalf of their people? Because there's got to be, surely there must be some underlying reason for this kindness.
Yes. This story, had it been that the US was the one spying, or Britain, would it be a story? No. I think they're trying to demonize China unnecessarily.
No, hold on. Is it just a story though, Ayo? Because, I mean, as I've just mentioned there, if China is going round building parliamentary buildings specifically for countries in Africa, different countries in Africa, are they just doing it just out of the kindness of their heart? I mean, I agree and I accept that the people who broke the story could have done it for a reason. We'll come to that in a moment. But there must be an underlying reason, surely.
It doesn't matter, because Africa, as a liberalized continent, has voted with its feet. It has chosen, for once in its lifetime, to decide the superpower it wants to do business with. In the past, the US and Britain had taken advantage of such opportunities at the expense of Africa. Now, Africans are saying, if we get it right or wrong, at least we did it on our own terms. They've chosen China as the partner to work with. Now, China chose Africa. Well, but China
Not
has
that
to,
I disagree with you, but China
has to
chose
protect
Africa.
the investment it has. And by doing so, it has to spy. All the superpowers spy on each other. They do. We must accept that as a truth, as a way of
China have denied. China have denied.
They would always, well, they are superpowers. So it's understandable that China will have to spy on what it feels necessary to invest, because it's invested billions. And if you're investing billions,
I accept.
Then naturally
that
it
they
comes
have
with
to
the territory.
protect their investment. I accept that. Juliana, I know that when Ayo was speaking there, you had a few things to say. Much as I accept that they have to protect, but do they have to protect it to this level? I mean, that there must be layers and layers of bugging, because surely they would have planned for contingently to say, well, if they find the one in the pen, they won't find the one under the table.
Yeah.
By the time they get to the one that's behind the couch, or the one that's in the ceiling, or the one that's actually embedded in the walls, I don't know.
Well, the African, the African Union is arguably Africa's most important building, and the good thing about it being in Addis Ababa, of course, we know that many of the world's humanitarian organizations are based there. So a lot of countries have a vested interest in that region. So thank God that they have help from the Israelis. The Israelis have been in the building and have helped them check to make sure that every kind of bug is out. But one thing I will say is that...
And the Israelis would have left their own bugs there now.
Say,
So now the Israelis are spying on us. Oh, please.
Okay, let's let Juliana conclude.
Well, that's an accusation. But one thing I would say is that, China, in all its helping Africa, have been accused of doing lots of really corrupt things in Africa. For example, propelling up corrupt governments, lots of backdoor agreements, really dodgy roads, not employing local people, and also as well, what a lot of people are saying is that the young generations of African politicians have been going to China to study. And so for the fact that they may have bugged the African Union and are finding out certain things that we may want to be doing in the future, I think is really, really dangerous, because we want to have control of our young leaders and our future politicians. But China seem to be really kind of grooming them. And of course, having this really important information is very, very dangerous.
Quite. And on that note, Lanre, I'm going to come to you. Is there some kind of naive trust between Africa and China? Because in Nigeria, for instance, we've seen cases where they've built power plants and it's in Cantonese. The instruction manuals in Cantonese.
Most likely Mandarin.
Oh, Mandarin, my apologies, of course, Mandarin. So is there this naive trust when it comes to the Chinese? Oh yeah, just let them do it, and then,
I hope it's not naivety. It might be laziness, to be totally honest with you, where, it's just a case of, well, let them do it. We're not too bothered as long as they get it up. We can't point the finger at China. We can do that if we want, but it's completely unproductive, because this is all about vigilance on the African side and taking responsibility for how you manage these projects. It is good that China is willing to put billions of dollars to build railways, to build ports, to build
So
infrastructure.
eventually they would own Africa, is
No,
what you're saying.
other places are not willing to do this. Without China, Africa wouldn't look the way it does today. We can't be flippant about this. Oh, yeah,
No,
we don't
I'm
need
not
China.
I'm not being flippant about it, but anyway, let me let
Africa
you finish.
would not. No, why would China own Africa just because they build infrastructure? If you manage the projects properly, you retain agency over them, you retain oversight over them. Why would they own anything? If you are lazy or naive in the process, then yes, you can be had, but you can't point the finger at a foreign country. They're not coming there out of the kindness of their heart. No country anywhere ever goes
Can I just,
Fair
anywhere
enough.
else
can I just
because
say
of
one
that.
quick
Fair
thing,
enough.
Priscilla? Sorry, Ivor. The reason why we should still be concerned, even though it's true, Africa wouldn't look the way it is, and China have become a really good, big brother. But cybersecurity, considering it is now the single most important means of a country protecting itself, because of course the internet and technology has outgrown us. I think the fact that they could have bugged the African Union shows that there is something that they were trying to do and could potentially influence African politics and leaders. It's very, very
I hear
scary.
you, and I am coming to you now, and that is to say that spying is not something new, as I've said already. Billion-dollar deals are done around the world, and people are spied on. They spy on these companies to find out, the tricks of the trade, as it were, so that they can get in. So it's not new, but are African leaders neglecting their responsibility to their people by allowing this level, as it were, of, turning their back, build the whole building, bring everything in, and it's not being supervised, it's not being, nobody's keeping an eye on it and ensuring that it is more to their benefit than it is to the Chinese?
Well, the bottom line is we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the know-how.
So are the leaders negating their
don't have the
responsibilities to the
know-how.
people?
But in
I don't
principle,
accept
what
that.
happens here is that you need to employ a spy to catch a spy. So China, as you said, is guilty. I mean, but for you to find out what China has really done, you need another spy to come and check it out. And that new spy who's going to come in and say, well, China has done this, they're going to drop their bombs there, their bugs, so they become the new spies. So you must accept that we're going to have spies all the time. And we must accept that. So I think these leaders have accepted that. So what we want is just the infrastructure. At some point in the time when we can get our levels to when we can get our spy agencies to the level where we can compete and then we can check ourselves.
We don't need spy agencies. I think we just need to keep an eye on what people are doing. But on a lighter note, guys, Sunday is Morocco and Nigeria, African Cup of Nations. Lanre, why are you pulling away, Lanre? Okay, so who's going to win this?
It's not the African Cup of Nations. It's not the big tournament.
No, but we're getting ready.
Who's
for
going to
the
win
African.
it?
Who's playing?
We're getting ready.
Nigeria
for
v Morocco.
Oh, of course, Nigeria now.
We're getting ready for this.
Well, the good thing is whoever wins, Africa is going to be taking the cup home. So either way, it's Africa. So
that's a cop out.
I'm not picking sides. Either way, it's Africa.
I love the way I was looking at you.
It's good. Football is what Africa is about. It's what makes us come together, and I'm hoping the Kenyans can come together. Let me sit down around the television, both Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga.
Juliana, what do you say? Who do you reckon is going to win?
Of course, Nigeria first and foremost.
You go, girl.
All the time.
Well, what can I say? Well, we wish the best team, may the best team win on Sunday. Don't forget to follow us at RealJHUK on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm Priscilla Nwikpo from the entire team here in London. Goodbye, and thank you for watching Journalist Hangout UK. Until next time.